And here we are, to what I consider to be the end of the golden age of Call of Duty. And I think a lot of people will agree on that statement. But hey, we had a good run, I definitely 100% would say. Because I would say Black Ops 2 stuck the landing at least 75 to 80% of it. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But anyway, let's get right into it. Because what's interesting about this Call of Duty is that now we're technically in about a month of the footage in the background you're seeing. In about a month, we're going to see, Los Angeles getting lit up. Well, no. It is funny to think about how, 13 years ago, it was such a big shocker, with how far into the future we had gotten with Call of Duty. Because I don't remember a Call of Duty before this point, taking place in the future. Not one that comes to my mind, at least right now. But, obviously things are much different compared to the 2025 of the game compared to now. For starters, we don't have a female president. We have the same president from 2016. And, we don't have a real-life Menendez. I know there was some jokes going around that there could be, but sadly we don't have that. I know there is still talk and theories that it could be possible, but, that's time will tell, I guess. The year is still young. I don't know. I don't think this campaign is going to come to life, in my personal opinion. But when it comes to Black Ops 2, this was honestly the last time I was hyped for any Call of Duty. And I remember seeing the trailer come out where it showed Woods was still alive. I remember having my mind blown. Because in Black Ops 1, he falls off with Kravchenko pulling the grenade pins and, they blow up. And, younger me at the time was upset and sad because, I loved Woods as a character. And, I didn't know the concept yet of film where if you don't see a body, and this is for any form of media, they're not dead. Except for the comic book industry, where they just seem to bring them back every so often. But that's not the point. At least in media, that's the rule. So always remember that for those who don't know. And just seeing the trailer and seeing all the footage, I was like, wow, what a trailer. And then we got the Los Angeles gameplay reveal, which is, a bit different version of the, footage here, but still nonetheless the same level, give or take. And I remember just being in awe, especially with the new, charge up and then fire penetrating through surface sort of sniper rifle DMR that they gave you, which is so much fun to use. And I had a little bit of fun using this again after so long, since it's been a while I'd used this weapon, because it's not in the multiplayer. But obviously for good reason it's not. It would be ridiculously overpowered. But regardless, this level still kind of sticks in my memory. Just remember being in awe of seeing this footage at the time and just being so excited again, the hype, I think, was a little bit different compared to Modern Warfare 3. I think it was dying down just a little bit, but I think it was still there. I just think that Modern Warfare 3 had a lot more build-up because of Modern Warfare 2, campaign-wise. Whereas Black Ops 2, that's not to say it's bad and it's building up, but it's more so they made a sequel without there being too much, in the room for building it up kind of thing. And then the last trailer I remember seeing was the one with FPS Russia and all the other celebrities, which I didn't realize Robert Downey Jr. was in that trailer until years later. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I missed that. But still, just seeing those three trailers still stick in my mind to this day, just because I remember passing it around. I was in 7th grade, passing everything around. We were all like super excited seeing all this new footage, and we were just like, man, I'm looking forward to seeing what this game's going to be. It's going to be in the future. We're going to have so much cool future tech and shit to play with. And at least for the campaign, when the campaign came out, in my opinion, I think this is the best, or one of the best, Call of Duty campaigns. The splitting choice decision making throughout it, where, your actions change the course of the story, which Call of Duty hasn't really perfectly executed as they have that mechanic. I know in Cold War they have somewhat that mechanic, but I haven't played Cold War's campaign, and I don't have a desire to, really. And I just like the different decision-making in the campaign. It was really cool to see. And then the class customization, being able to bring in custom classes and everything, especially unlocking the gold camo, which I thought was really cool, by doing the Strike Force missions and a couple other challenges. So that was real nice to have. I was a little bummed it wasn't diamond camo, but, hey, we still got gold, and I think gold in this game looks pretty decent. I wouldn't say it's better than Black Ops 1's gold, but I'd say it's pretty close. And I swear, one of the things I am proud about is I caught on quite quickly because I had made the decisions in the Black Ops 2 campaign to the best I could, and obviously I still kind of got the bad ending where the White House was stormed and burned down and all that, and I didn't save Karma, and I still saved Harper because I liked Harper, but I remember being so distraught because I thought I had shot Mason, even though it's kind of weird that getting shot by a 50 cal you somehow survive. It's Call of Duty, don't question it. If it was any other sniper rifle, I wouldn't be questioning it, but regardless, I didn't shoot him in the head. I shot him in the leg because there was the quote of Krashenko playing, he even has people at CIA, and I was like, wait, I don't know if I want to shoot this. Something doesn't seem right. Like, I knew something was suspicious. And so I did that, but then as the music started swelling up and everything, I was panicking. I was like, wait, maybe I couldn't have not had to shoot him. Like, why did I have to shoot him? I started panicking. I remember that panic. And then, it's revealed that it's Mason that you shoot. And I was visibly pissed and upset, and I legit was trying to think that there was some other way to do it, even though I had done it. I just didn't realize it. And, yeah, but I was really distraught by that. And then at the end, when I found out he was still alive, I was all, happy and giddy. And, obviously I did kill Menendez my first time because, I'm a kid, get to take down the big bad guy, which Menendez, I think, is, again, another top 5 contender of villains in Call of Duty. I even argue he might even be better than Makarov in some ways because we at least know more about him than Makarov. Makarov's just a big baddie, but Menendez had, a backstory, why he was doing the things he was doing, and it was played very near perfectionly by the late Camar de los Reyes. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But he sadly passed away Christmas Eve of 2023, which I thought was sad because he did such a great performance, and he was 56 years old. He wasn't even that old. That's what makes it even sadder too. So regardless, his performance lives on, and I'm glad that he was able to contribute to Call of Duty in the way he did, and he did a fantastic job portraying Menendez, and couldn't have it any other way. So thank you again, Kamar, for your contribution to Call of Duty and creating one of, if not the best antagonists in Call of Duty, and probably one of the top antagonists of gaming. So, but I think that's really all I have to say about it when it comes to the campaign. I mean, there's cool little moments here and there with the tech and with some of the cool characters that the game offers, and the characterization. Like, I love how David Mason section, I find him compelling enough. I don't think he holds a candle to Alex Mason, but that might just be biased and all that. But still, I just hold a good regard to Black Ops 2's campaign as being probably my personal favorite, but also just probably the most layered in content. Because there's no really other Call of Duty campaign that I feel has this much content in terms of replayability and variety than really this campaign. And this is why I think this is also a good cutting point for, the Golden Era Call of Duty, because I think this is the highest you could go in terms of content in a Call of Duty campaign, obviously without co-op campaign. And I know that there is another Call of Duty down the road that does have more campaign features, but regardless, I think this is a nice package all around in what the campaign brings. And, that's all I have really to say without going too crazy in depth and psychoanalyzing every little thing. I just remember playing it quite a few times, having so much fun, replaying certain sections of the campaign with different weapons, bringing future weapons. Like, there were so many things I did, especially that mission where you ran with Raul Menendez with the machete and slicing up all those, soldiers. That was another cool, fun moment. But I think that's all I really have to say. So let's now segue right into the multiplayer. Now, I remember quite a bit in what I used to, run as a Black Ops 2's multiplayer. And in particular, I remember mostly the old YouTubers like KYR Speedy, Vanoss Gaming, when they did those, Black Ops 2 funny moments kind of things, screwing around in lobbies. I mean, those had existed before. I just remember this was around the time I started getting into those videos and seeing, those guys horsing around and having fun on there. And I also forgot to mention this a little bit sooner, but I did get the game on PC a few months after I got it on PS3 just because I had extra money for Christmas that year. So I figured, why don't I just get it on PC? And I did also get the DLCs eventually for that as well. But the one thing I remember is I remember getting a laptop and I played it at the library whenever I could. Like whenever I was done with homework, I'd play it there, and then all the other kids, you know, would come around and watch me playing, and it was a big kind of thing for me at the time, just because I felt popular. I felt like I was being recognized, and people were liking what I was doing. So it was kind of it's one of those as a kid you like it when people surround you and are curious what you're doing. And I still, funny enough, have that laptop. I didn't get rid of it. I still have it to this day. So I actually cleaned it out about 2 years ago, and it at the time became my mobile laptop again. But then I dropped it for another laptop I got. I still have it. It's just I've switched. So anyway, my time in the multiplayer was also, consisted of playing with friends, having some fun in the online, going in the mic, and, being a squeaker still because, my balls hadn't completely dropped, and I had, the voice crack, that. And it, obviously, we still got those Modern Warfare 2 lobby moments, but I will admit, and I think it was starting to die down just a little bit. I think this was around the time Microsoft and PlayStation was trying to crack down on that, which is just kind of a shame for me. Let's bring back bullying. No, I'm kidding. I'm not advocating for that. But, there is some science and truth to, sometimes being bullied does make people stop doing stupid things. I don't know. Regardless, I still had quite a bit of fun playing the multiplayer of Black Ops 2, and I just remember really getting into the sniping scene a bit here. I mean, it's kind of similar to Modern Warfare 3, but I think more so in this game just because the DSR was a lot of fun to use, and you can kind of see in the footage of going back to those moments. And I remember, I think there was, no, that's Black Ops 3, but I remember trying to set up the bots to, be sort of like zombies, only running around with a knife and playing that with some friends on Nuketown, the futuristic one. And then there was, Hijack, where I, did the same thing again. But, that was such a nice, cool, fun, small map. And I think a lot of, if not most of, Black Ops 2's maps are, particularly well-balanced and great. Not Aftermath, way too open in certain areas and just felt weirdly conjoined together. But still, I think most of the maps were a lot of fun to play. And, especially the DLC ones. The DLC ones were pretty nice, too, because I had gotten the Season Pass for this game, so I got all the content. And I think that's the last time I got a Season Pass right as I bought the game. From here on out, I would buy the Season Pass, eventually. It's for money reasons, mostly. Otherwise, I would have probably still, buy like crazy. But regardless, I liked a lot of the maps in that game, and I remember trying to get diamond camo for the shotguns just to start it off. Snipers I tried and failed and sucked. I mean, it's true. I sucked at it. But I still had fun trying. But the shotguns were easy to get diamond. But then I kind of just stopped because it was a lot harder for the other ones. I had to get all these headshots, and I wasn't that good with the headshots. Not even going to sugarcoat it. But I just, in my head, I'm just going through little key moments of, fun, excitement. Because this was around the time where I still had my childhood innocence on some level. And I say this because I will at least disclose this, even though it has nothing to do with the video. But this is about like a year or two before I started to be forced to grow up. So, looking back around these times, there's a weird fondness to them. And it's what I've said in my previous video when it comes to nostalgia. I definitely like going back to key moments of my life, and I'd love to do that. But I'd always like to come back here. I'd always like to go and relive some of the memories I have in school just for, a bit. But then at the end of the day, I'd be like, all right, it's time to come back to reality. I had my fun here. Let's come back. In the end, that's how at least I view it. And this is kind of one of those games where I can go back and play this game over and over the years and, try to relive these multiplayer moments. But in the end, it's just not the same. I mean, especially on PC, because now the game just looks much more crisper and everything. I think it has to come down to even the resolution, the visuals, because it was this weird conjoined, on PC I played, and then PS3 I played, I kept going back and forth on them, and then eventually I would just go to PC from here on out. Kind of. I would kind of pick and forth, back and forth, between the two platforms until ultimately, actually, no, I would still be alternating between the two platforms to this game, but that's a different story for another time. Usually depending on if I got the game for free or at a cheaper price, or vice versa. But regardless, I think that's all I have to say about Black Ops 2's multiplayer. Just good memories in the past of talking with people, in the lobbies because PS3 did not have voice chat, and on PC, and there was some voice chat too. I remember playing with some friends there too as well, but I think it was really PS3 I dominated the most with the multiplayer and even parts of the zombies before I really went further with PC. But anyway, I think that's all I have to say about the multiplayer. So now we can segue right into the zombies part. So, in my humble opinion, and I don't think this is a completely unpopular opinion, Black Ops 2 Zombies did a lot of things great, but there were quite a few setbacks. And the most notable aspects that were setbacks, to get it out of the way, was Transit and Die Rise. Now, they are not the worst maps I've played. There's one map in particular that I have played in recent memory that I consider to be the worst thing I've ever played. But hey, if we ever get to that, I will make sure that it is known. But Transit and Die Rise, in particular, at the time, they were considered to be the worst zombies maps. Now, some people say Die Rise isn't that bad, and I will agree with that statement, because, people were hyping this map up at the time, because in comparison to Transit, they were like, oh, it's so much better than trans shit, as I remember people calling it that. But, to me, Transit was a lot of fun, especially if you got to try out the 8-player glitch, which I never did, but on Plutonium I was able to experience Transit with 8 players. Let me tell you, that map is actually a lot of fun with 8 players. But Die Rise, it's just a mixed bag. Like, the whole PhD flopper not being on that map when it clearly should have been, and then, it technically being there because it's an Easter egg, but you can't access it, was so stupid. I'm sorry, but it was such a dumb thing. The Soliquifier was really cool to, use pre-patch. Post-patch it was still good, but pre-patch it was a beast in of itself. But regardless, Die Rise was not as good as people like to think it is. At least I just never could enjoy it because of the weird verticality of it. Yeah, there is the jumping jacks. You can get a free perk bottle by just meleeing them and training them in like that China room area is nice. And then Die Rise becomes a breeze. But it's that build up to it that I was just never that much of a fan of personally. And Transit was it was very ambitious, and I respect for what they were doing with Transit, but, there were limitations because of the PS3. The fog in the Denizens is literally there to slow the player down so that the PS3 and 360 had enough time to load the map. And I have actually played a defogged version of Transit on PC through Plutonium, and it's actually very nice. Like, very, really nice. And there's another one I had a lot of fun with, especially a winter theme one. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Those 2 maps, not much of a fan of. Buried, I think, was okay. I wouldn't really call it, like, anything standout. I think it's fine. It's fine. Like, it's not the worst thing ever. It's fine, It's a nice, enjoyable time, and it has some good things in there, too. And, the Paralyzer is a lot of fun to use. Took me a minute to remember what it was. But, I think it was a fine map. Leroy was cool to have around the map. He was a very useful tool that you could use. But overall, I wasn't much of a fan of the Victus crew even. Like, I find them kind of annoying. Misty, Misty I think was the coolest out of all of them. Not, beyond her 2 assets. But she, at least had some color and personality to her. Stullinger, I hate him. He's annoying. Russman, I think he's fine, I guess. Marlton, fine, but it can get really annoying with some of his quotes. I just wasn't really grabbed by the Victus crew. Like, grabbed much if at all. I just feel like they weren't really built up strongly. I know that later on they kind of are, but still, it's like, I wasn't that much of a fan of them. But then we get to the, the meat and potatoes, which is, Mob of the Dead and Origins, and I think the survival maps, including Nuketown. I didn't forget about that, because I think Nuketown is underrated, especially if you want to put yourself to the test if you're a good zombies player. And I say that just because the perk machines randomly spawn on the map. I do wish Jug would maybe spawn a bit sooner, but it does, tell you the test of your ability as a zombies player if you can survive on Nuketown without Jug for quite a while. And I always push myself to do it. So I feel I have a little soft spot for Nuketown zombies, at least, just because, I like that sort of challenge I had as a kid. Kind of, I don't know, it was just something cool to try out as a challenge. How long can I survive until Jug arrived, and then I was set up. But, and the other survival maps I thought was cool. Bus Tipa was basically a discount Nocturne Totem, and, we did have the original Nocturne Totem technically in the map, but you couldn't really... It's weird. Like, it's where one of the parts were for the jet gun in Transit, which is... But, it's one of the worst wonder weapons we've ever had. I forgot to mention that earlier when I was talking about Transit, but that's just because it's so forgettable. You forget the thing even exists, and you forget to use it because it just breaks after a couple uses. So, but I think Town, Farm... the survival maps are cool. And, I never really played Grief. Never really did. So I don't know how that was. But regardless, Mob of the Dead, wow. What a great map. It was a whole different crew, but what a great map nonetheless. I still think about that map to this day. And just what a masterpiece of a map, seriously. I really believe it. What a masterpiece of a map. I really like Mob after all these years. I had a lot of hard time getting into it and trying it out because, it was a lot more close quarters. But over time, I eventually grew to love and experience it. And I have not only a soft spot for it, but I think it's one of the top 5 best zombies maps you've ever gotten. And Origins, similar boat, but I feel like it's a slight step down compared to Mob, but not entirely. It's just, they're both great maps, and I got to rank them somehow and somewhere. Because, Origins has the Ice Staff, and then Mob of the Dead has, the Blunder Gat, the Acid Gat. In this version, it did. And then Origins, had the Ice Staff and all the Lightning, Wind, Fire, and all their upgrades, which I think they were all good. Maybe the Lightning, not so much. But the Ice was clearly the best, with the Wind being second in my ranking, then Fire, then Lightning. So, just a good 2 maps overall. And I played both of them, religiously as best I could. And I remember playing it on, PC and playing with some friends. Like I said, I interchanged between the 2 of them. But I remember those high rounds, I would stay up as late as I could with friends, trying to get as fast and far as we could. I didn't really do the Easter eggs, I still don't really care much about Easter eggs and zombies, in my opinion. But regardless, I hold those 2 maps in such high regards, and even the survival maps. But when I said at the beginning, 75 to 80%, it was basically the Victus part, not the survival maps, but that Victus part, I feel like kind of hurts the zombies experience, at least in terms of like being a complete package. But overall, I still think Black Ops 2 Zombies was a great way to continue the legacy and story of it, of what they were trying to build off of after blowing up the moon on Black Ops 1, even though we would then jump into some weird interdimensional shit that I completely lost sight of in my head and didn't understand anything of it until literally after Black Ops 4 came out. Regardless, I still think that Black Ops 2 Zombies was a great package all around, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I truly feel like this was, another good era of zombies, despite some of the shortcomings, because, at least with Transit, they were trying to be ambitious, and if they had the PS4, I bet you Transit would have been a completely different map, or the same map, but actually its full potential realized. And, Die Rise could have easily been fixed more. Like, please, you should have just given us a PhD flopper, not left us that troll that was stupid. But anyway, to close it all off and tying everything back together, overall Black Ops 2, I think, really marked the end of an era. The end of the golden age of Call of Duty as we know it. And it makes me sad. Like, honestly, throughout making and recording this video, I've been getting, like, a huge rush of memories. And I don't know if it's because of, we're seeing the end of the golden era and we're finally at this point, or if it's me just reliving things for the sake of reliving as I talk about it. I don't know. But I can just tell you that I really hold this era of Call of Duty in such a high regard. And I guess the question is, will we ever return to that era? No. I think at this point, Call of Duty's golden years are long behind them. And I just feel that, yes, the newer ones do offer things here and there. But I really think that, like, there's something special about this era, and there's a reason why there's modded clients, why there's stuff like Plutonium, IW4X, or Alterware now, as it's called, not X Labs anymore. And you just see all these modded clients used to keep these Call of Duties alive for years to come. There's a reason why people hold these games in such a high regard. And I'm just glad, again, that I was a part of this experience, because Black Ops 2 just had a good all-around package, and it helped feed into my, wanting and need to have, more Call of Duty in my life even more. And I'm just not only glad for Black Ops 2, but for these games to have touched my heart and contributed to my childhood on some level, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think that's all I have really to say. As for the future of these My Experience videos, next Saturday will be something completely different, a different franchise altogether. And I will be shortening these much more, but I wanted to at least close off the Call of Duty era, the best I possibly could. And I'm glad I did. Will I continue with the later Call of Duties? Yeah, maybe. but I don't know. I don't think there's really too much to talk about that because after Black Ops 2, my love of Call of Duty started to die down quite a bit just because the Call of Duties that came after just didn't satisfy that same itch or, get me excited. And honestly, a lot of these Call of Duties, they have a lot more cons than pros, and so it's not going to be, a lot of, looking back fondly. Kind of like how I've been doing it with these videos, but we'll just see, I definitely want to switch to a different franchise, and what that franchise is, I'll leave you with a little hint. It's similar to this franchise. It's a Call of Duty, but that's all I have really to say. You'll just have to wait for Thursday for the footage, and we'll just go from there. So, anyway, thanks for tuning in and sticking with this series, and I will see you guys Tuesday with another video. Take care and have a good rest of your weekend.